She radiated on screen.
I quite agree.
But away from the spotlight, her life was shrouded in darkness.
What kind of a life did she have? She never was really happy. I don't think there was ever anybody that really understood her.
Marilyn never felt for sure that there was any human being that was completely interested in her as a person.
She stopped and said, "You're only interested in my body." That's what it always comes down to.
It's a hard life. It's not an easy life. And she tried her best.
She's been adored the world over for generations.
Well, I loved her right away. She is iconic and defines Hollywood glamour.
But she was a child that nobody wanted.
And she was sobbing. She said, "I'm not an orphan. I have a mother."
This is an intimate look at a life that ended much too soon. This is Real Life Marilyn Monroe. Hello everyone, and welcome to Real Life Marilyn Monroe. I'm Dana Devon. I'm standing outside the famous Beverly Hills Hotel, a favorite getaway of the late screen legend. Well, Marilyn Monroe died 50 years ago, but she is just as relevant today as she was during her tumultuous 16 years of fame. And while Marilyn may be one of a kind, over the years, Hollywood's been busy trying to recreate her.
We're having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave.
Michelle Williams was nominated for an Oscar for her brilliant portrayal of Marilyn in My Week with Marilyn. The actress acknowledged the challenge of portraying the icon.
In a way, you sort of had to remove the fact that she was an icon and put that out of your mind because it would be too daunting, and instead try and think of her as a girl, as an ordinary girl, which is really how she wanted to be thought of ultimately.
Shall I be her?
Who?
Marilyn.
But Marilyn isn't just being celebrated on the big screen. Steven Spielberg created an entire TV show about two starlets clamoring to play Marilyn on Broadway.
I think it's genius to tap into the plot lines of her life and parallel them into storylines in Smash. You know, each character kind of mirrors some aspect of her life, so it really behooves all of us to do our research.
She has such a drive and such a love for what she does, and I think that's where I relate most with her, just sort of that just relentless nature of just being determined to do what you do and not taking no for an answer, and that I really relate with.
Audiences really related with Charlotte Sullivan, who played Marilyn Monroe in the miniseries The Kennedys.
He said we would get married.
No.
No, he promised me,
No, there's no marriage.
But it's not just scripted TV that's cashing in on Marilyn. Madonna, dressed to imitate in her 1985 Material Girl video, steals the look from the hit musical number Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend.
But diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Lindsay Lohan recreated a famous Marilyn pose for New York Magazine and then channeled Marilyn once again for Playboy. Even Penelope Cruz copied her look for her role in the 2009 film Broken Embraces. So why all this Marilyn mania?
Hollywood has been in love with Marilyn Monroe for more than half a century. Men loved her sexiness and could appreciate that. And in fact, that's what drew them to her. Women could appreciate how vulnerable she was and her frailty with emotions, but both men and women both wanted to rescue her.
Baby, I'm through with love.
Rescue came to Marilyn in the form of her first husband, Jimmy Doherty, who married Marilyn when she was 16. Shortly thereafter, Jim was shipped off to fight in World War II, and Marilyn found herself working in a munitions factory.
Can you believe that the future Marilyn Monroe landed up spraying fire retardant material on airplane parts and inspected parachutes? It's extraordinary, but this is where it all began for Marilyn Monroe. The photographer David Conover came to film what were considered morale booster photos.
From those photographs, she was taken to a modeling agency, the Blue Book agency, and she really was very popular as a model. She modeled at the Roosevelt Hotel in swimsuits and all over the place. And then Ben Lyon, who was a casting director at 20th Century Fox, He discovered her and put her under contract.
She signed her first contract with 20th Century Fox in 1946. Her first screen appearance for Fox was in a Betty Grable movie called The Shocking Miss Pilgrim, but she didn't end up on screen. All we do is hear her voice briefly. She did small parts, bit parts.
One in a picture called Ticket to Tomahawk. I had one word. Well, not exactly a word. I said,
Columbia Pictures signed her on in 1948. She made one movie there called Ladies of the Chorus, and then they dropped her. It was her new agent, Johnny Hyde, that really started to turn things around for her and got her the parts that made people notice, like All About Eve.
That's how you met me, in passing.
I'm afraid Mr. DeWitt would find me boring before too long.
You won't bore him, honey. You won't even get a chance to talk.
And The Asphalt Jungle.
Imagine me on this beach here in my green bathing suit. Yipe! Well, one of the best parts I've ever had was in The Asphalt Jungle, John Huston's picture, and then 7 Year Itch.
In between those two movies, of course, were some of her biggest hits, like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire.
Do you know who I'd like to marry? Who? Rockefeller.
Which one?
I don't care.
And though they may not have been her favorites, they were what the public wanted to see her do, be a sexy blonde.
Girl's best friend.
She always wanted to find a man who would love her for her, would protect her, most important. And to be able to protect her, he would have to be a powerful individual.
It was during this time that Marilyn married her second husband, baseball great Joe DiMaggio, on January 14, 1954. They lived here in this home in Beverly Hills, but unfortunately, the marriage wouldn't last.
Joe DiMaggio was in New York City for the very famous filming of Marilyn Monroe's street scene with the iconic white dress for the 7 Year Itch.
Isn't it delicious?
Joe DiMaggio really had a problem with this. He felt his wife, and I think the operative word was wife, not just Marilyn Monroe, but his wife, Marilyn Monroe, was being exploited.
He doesn't want his wife standing there with the skirts up over her head. I mean, what would Mama say? And don't forget, he's Joe DiMaggio. What would, the guys in the locker room say, huh?
And he couldn't understand why it had to be done so many times in an open set with all these strangers that were onlookers. He was fuming. That caused Joe and Marilyn real friction, and by all accounts, it was truly the actual beginning to the end of their marriage.
It also marked the beginning of a desire for Marilyn to be taken more seriously.
Audiences enjoyed her in some of these popular movies, but she was looking for something more and more of a challenge. That's why she moved to New York and enrolled in Lee Strasberg's prestigious Actors Studio to take classes there. That's also where she first met and started dating the playwright Arthur Miller.
Marilyn Monroe married the well-known playwright Arthur Miller in 1956.
She married the wrong guys for the wrong reasons. She wanted to be an intellect. People wouldn't believe it even if she was an intellect. And she wasn't stupid, for heaven's sakes.
Well, I think she thought that if the world embraced those people, whether it was DiMaggio or Norman Mailer or anyone else, if the world found something in them, there must be something there, and it would be worthwhile her relating to it.
While she was living in New York, she partnered with photographer Milton Green to start their own production company.
Got a few things in mind, but nothing definite as yet.
Marilyn, tell me, what's the basic reason for this corporation?
Primarily to contribute to help making good pictures.
And it was through that company that they launched a pretty ambitious production, The Prince and the Showgirl, to be made in England, co-starring and directed by Sir Laurence Olivier.
Say, wouldn't it be a good thing if you and him made it up? I mean, for your country and for European peace and all that?
These things are not done so easily, you know.
Oh, I don't know. With a little give and take, it wouldn't be so hard.
In 1959, she won a Golden Globe for her wonderful portrayal of Sugar Cane in Some Like It Hot, Billy Wilder's wonderful comedy. And it was a film that actually her playwright husband, Arthur Miller, encouraged her to do.
I'm I'm Sugar Cane.
Hi. Sugar Cane?
Yeah, I changed it. Used to be Sugar Kowalczyk.
You Polish?
Yes.
2 years later, she co-starred with Clark Gable and Montgomery Clift in a movie that was written especially for her by her husband, The Misfits, directed by the same man who gave her such a good break in The Asphalt Jungle, John Huston.
But what if someday, suddenly you turn around and you don't like me anymore?
Marilyn and Arthur Miller, their marriage was rather turbulent. And by the time the film wrapped, they did not return home together. And ultimately, within a few weeks, a true separation. And their divorce was finalized in January 1961.
Is anybody any different? Maybe you're not supposed to believe what people say. Maybe it's not even fair to them.
The Misfits was the last Marilyn Monroe movie to be released to the public, but it wasn't her last project. In 1962, she started making a romantic comedy at Fox called Something's Got to Give with Dean Martin. And this was to have been kind of a return to form for her, but it was plagued with problems right from the beginning.
Oh, well, we always wondered whether she'd show up for work. That was our main concern. We just didn't know if there was a Marilyn Monroe around who could come and work in a movie.
During the filming, Marilyn claimed she was sick and ordered a flight to New York to sing Happy Birthday to President John F. Kennedy.
When Marilyn returned from her long weekend in New York, shall we say the hell broke loose on this set. And it was never the same for Marilyn.
When she returned to Hollywood from that now famous trip to New York City, she was fired by 20th Century Fox. They said she'd only shown up for work 12 days out of 35 days of production. Months later, she finally resolved her dispute with Fox. They wrote a new contract that would have given her $1 million for a 2-picture deal, and they scheduled a resumption of filming for Something's Gotta Give that fall.
But sadly, that was never to be. On Saturday, August 4th, 1962, at the age of 36, Marilyn died in her Brentwood home from an apparent overdose, although some say it was suicide. Others speculate that it was murder. With no family, no children, and 3 failed marriages, Marilyn died alone.
And that was one of the things that had always plagued Marilyn in her thoughts from the time she was a child. You know, she equated being loved as being wanted. And in her mind, because she was alone, she was not wanted, which translated to not being loved. And that's the difficulty of poor Marilyn Monroe and her life.
Marilyn Monroe was laid to rest here at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery 50 years ago. And in 50 years, there's never been another one like her. We'll have more on Marilyn's final days later when we talk with 2 photographers who were working with her right up to the end. But first, we return to the orphanage where Marilyn lived as we uncover her lonely childhood.
She would stare out at that and dream of becoming another Jean Harlow.
And later, we'll hear from the ultimate playboy on how Marilyn launched his career.
That image was taken by our art director, Arthur Paul, and turned into an iconic cover.
Then, Mitzi Gaynor shares for the first time intimate stories of working with Marilyn on the set of There's No Business Like Show Business.
Nothing fazed her. She was very determined to make herself into Marilyn Monroe.
Welcome back to Real Life Marilyn Monroe. I'm Dana Devon. Marilyn Monroe only existed for the last 16 years of the star's life. So who was she before she was the blonde bombshell on the big screen? And how did her dreams of being a star begin? Well, many say they started right here at the Holly Grove Orphanage in Hollywood.
Well, when she lived here when it was still the Los Angeles Orphans Home Society, and because she slept in the upstairs girls' hall, and she could see the Paramount water tower, Paramount Studios. So she would stare out at that and dream of becoming another Jean Harlow, because her mother's best friend used to take her to the movies all the time, and she loved Jean Harlow, and so she would emulate Jean Harlow, and try the clothes. They was dressed like Jean Harlow.
It was from this exact center second story window